elected body that ran the affairs of the city at the time. They had been serving on the Board of Aldermen from earlier periods all the way through till 1898. And at the state level, we had African Americans serving in the legislature and in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. These weren't people from Wilmington, but yet at the same point, African Americans had a voice in politics from the local level all the way up prior to 1898.
One of the things that a lot of people talk about, and Tim Tyson and other people have written this anthology called Democracy Betrayed. And I think it's a good point. I think it was working, this experiment, if you want to call it an experiment, of blacks and whites joining together, voting together as a bloc, putting their people in. It was working. So I think, to answer your question, the blacks, the African Americans in Wilmington, were on a new vista. They said, well, we were freed from slavery. Now we're freedmen. Now we can be a part of this political process. We can be a part of this economic process. And we can be a part of this social process. And that's what you have to have in order to be, I think, in order to be a fulfilled American citizen. You have to feel like you're part of this process. And I think they definitely felt that they were part of the process, just by the mere fact that they had someone that looked like them on the Board of Aldermen. I think it was great. It was apparently a good time to be alive before November 11th, 1898. It's not funny though, is it?
It's the Constitution and bylaws of the white government union created in 1897 by the North Carolina Democratic Party. And it's an actual pamphlet that was printed by the Democratic Party in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're going to get a better copy than this because the copier at Latimer House is not the best. But this is what we got for right now. And it's several pages long, and it describes how they're to organize, how they're to report, and how their aim is to install white supremacy government in North Carolina. It even tells them how to organize. The White Government Union was a secret political society that is prohibited by the Constitution of the state of North Carolina. It is much like the Klan, but actually much more organized and much greater secrecy involving the White Government Union. The White Government Union was created by a vote of the North Carolina Executive Committee of the North Carolina Democratic Party in 1897. Wilmington attorney William Barry McCoy was its first executive chairman. And he was also the attorney for New Hanover County. He was like the prosecutor. He was also the chairman of the New Hanover County Board of Elections and a member of the Masons and many other social and political organizations in New Hanover County. He was an attorney who had actually studied law under a Supreme Court justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. The White Government Union was actually created to organize the Democrats, to terrorize the populists, and to vote Democrat, and to break up the fusionist coalition of the populist and black Republicans so that the Democrats could re-seize political power in North Carolina. And in fact,
I'm currently watching a
copy of their Constitution and bylaws here, and in their preface, and it's about they say that's exactly what their intent is to do. There's been a division
of the Democratic
between
Party,
white men. Well, the
that
division
Democratic
was
Party,
the Democratic Party
today's
and the
Republican
Populist
Party,
Party.
those
And so
Southern
the
Democrats,
White Government Union was created to
Republican,
break
but
up that fusion
when the
of the
Democratic Party
populist and
went into North
Republican.
Carolina,
And it even
basically
says so
staged a
right here in
coup
their Constitution
and
and
took over
bylaws
the local
that was
government
their intent.
and killed
The
hundreds.
Democratic Party created the White Government Union in 1897, and they had militias like the Wilmington Light Infantry, which were state militias like today's National Guard, and they had them in most of the counties, but they weren't large enough to pull off a coup d'etat. And so basically, the members of the militias created a de facto militia called the Red Shirts. The Red Shirts weren't members of the local militias, but they took their orders from them. They were like, the militias were like the officers, and the Red Shirts were the in the trenches troops. They did the dirty work. And so that's what the Red Shirt militia basically was unofficial militia.
They would tell you if you came to vote, they'd kill you. And they would. But their main violence thing was either burn down a black business. If you seem like you're moving too forward economically, then you had to go. So they destroy your business. Or again, back to assemblies, that was the main thing that they did not want black people to get involved into, because they realized the power of the vote. And you risk your life just to go down to vote.
The Red Shirts were
Freedom ain't free. Freedom was never easy.
Thing to North Carolina in 1898. We had never seen Red Shirt
Never
activity
easy.
here. They're akin to the Ku Klux Klan in that they use white supremacy and intimidation and violence, but they're different because they wore bright red shirts, they didn't cover their faces, and the things they did were in broad daylight. The Red Shirts were a new tool of the Democratic Party, and whenever there was a meeting of the white government union, there also happened to be a rally of the Red Shirts at the same time.
It wasn't blued in.
They closely worked hand in hand to make use of the same resources.
I'd also like to say this, too, that when the North Carolina Democratic Party's Executive Committee created the White Government Union in 1897, they did so by a vote. Well, we know that it was created. We have their Constitution and bylaws. It even says within the Constitution and bylaws it was created by the Democratic Party to do this. What I'd like to know is, when was the vote taken to abolish their secret political society? I'd like the North Carolina Democratic Party Executive Committee to answer that question, because I've never heard that it was ever abolished.
So what you're saying
Probably
is
proud of that heritage.
I think it's alive and well in North Carolina.
Tell me a little bit about your grandfather, Alex Manley. What was his background?
Alex Manley, his name was actually Alexander, but everybody called him Alex. He is the acknowledged grandson of the governor of North Carolina, Charles Manley. So he looked more white than black. He went to Hampton, studied painting, actually commercial painting, painting buildings and stuff like that. And apparently he must have taken classes in printing. I've tried to get his papers, well, not tried, I got some of his papers from Hampton, but they're not that extensive. And he came to Wilmington to work, and in my grandmother's letter, his wife, he worked with her father and saw her and was smitten by her, but her family didn't want her to marry him because he was too light. They didn't want to marry somebody that light.
We're watching Wilmington on Fire.
Started as a weekly.
As I get ready for my
at
day
one
to
time
start our
the
stream.
only daily black paper in the country.
Been
And he had
studying
good contact with white business people. They advertised in the paper and did very well. What created a problem for him, a lady named Rebecca Latimer Felton, who happened to be the first female U.S. Senator. She became U.S. Senator when Watson, great Klansman here in Atlanta, died, made a speech in Tybee Island, which is a resort outside of Savannah, Georgia, called Women on the Farm. And her speech revolved around the fact that these white women who were working on the farm after the Civil War were out working with blacks.
Salute, mental son.
Or whatever. And they were not protected by their men, and blacks were raping them at will. And her argument was that to protect these pure white
I
women,
wasn't talking to you.
that if they lynched 1,000 blacks a day, it wouldn't be enough.
So Manley was incensed by that He wrote an editorial, and within the editorial, he cites the fact that there were white women who were going with black men,
Mm.
you know, willingly, not against the, consensually, and he says it's not a big secret at all, and he talked about the fact that there were white men messing with black women, having sexual relationships with black women, you know, and that's like, um, that's a boogeyman. You don't cross that line. Makes no matter how white he looked. You don't cross that line because one of the main things that the white man holds in high esteem is his
Well,
woman.
he
You don't touch
looks
them.
like it.
They're like
Guys,
forbidden fruit.
she's actually the most
Taboo
abused woman on the
in
planet.
1898. But this stuff has been going on since they got off the boat, man. Black, white men.
So you got this situation in Wilmington in the late 1800s where working class black people and white people have built this town, but it's a majority black town, Wilmington, North Carolina, and they're thriving. And obviously, you have people in high places who don't like it. Particularly the white Democratic leadership who don't like it. They don't like it. They see intermingling of blacks and whites, intermarriages of blacks and whites, the whole 9 yards, business success in the black community, and there's a speech made by a white woman who is a high standing white woman that's claiming that white women are being forced to work on farms in Wilmington. They're being raped in Wilmington, that sort of thing. Well, Mr. Manley, who was a well-to-do brother in Wilmington and had a newspaper, he came out with an article, saying that no, now there are some white girls messing around with brothers, but they not being forced. They doing all that willingly. You know what I'm saying? That is going down in Wilmington, and of course that creates. He puts this out in the paper publicly, and of course that creates a firestorm and starts beginning to give the racists the marketing they need to eradicate Wilmington.
Have been having sexual relationships with black women.
Imagine living in a world where this is in the newspaper. White women slandered. Leading Negro Republican newspaper excuses rapists. Declares that attractive white girls of culture fall in love with Negroes and the assaults committed are the result of mutual love and not of violence. Imagine writing that as a headline with a straight face. Because they know they lying when they say it, right? But they have to uphold an image, and they're weaponizing this fear. They're weaponizing this in order to gain power. The poor white women are charged with secret meetings with Negro men and with being infatuated with them. Oh, we know that's far fetched, huh? We know that's far fetched. That's far fetched to think that white women would be infatuated with black men. That never happens, right? Come on, man. But imagine this being in the newspaper, like you can hardly talk about race publicly now. But imagine this being in the newspaper.
And vice versa. But they use that as an excuse to stir up the masses of the white people, to get the white men ticked off, and it worked.
So Manley became an example of what the type of man the white men needed to combat was. And so he became a target of the 1898 campaign. And he was had a bodyguard, and he had people with him at all times to protect him. His newspaper was being printed in a storefront in downtown. The store owner was fearful that his building would be damaged, so he asked Manley to leave. He had to move to another building on the outskirts of town. And so Manley became a part of the rhetoric of the Democratic Party's campaign of 1898. Well, the newspapers of 1898 didn't really subscribe to a truth in journalism mindset. And Josephus Daniels
They
admitted
still
later
don't.
in life that if it was a good
The media
story
still don't tell
and
the
it
truth.
sold papers, then he was going to print it. And if he found out later that it wasn't true, well, oh, well, I sold some papers. I don't necessarily have to rebut what I just printed. So he wanted to sell papers. He wanted to promote the Democratic Party agenda. And so every story that he published in the NNO was with an eye to that goal. And the other papers in the state that were
Look at that propaganda.
pro-Democratic Party followed suit. And so an erroneous article would get printed in one paper and reprinted in another paper, and it just
Negro
spread.
rule.
So the Democratic Party used the newspapers. And to add to the level of the propaganda are those cartoons that you see in the news.
So this is the 1890s, right? This is the 1890s. This is after Reconstruction. You have certain towns where black people are thriving, and so the fear of Negro rule, the fear that they're going to do to us what we've done to them, is being propagated by the Democratic Party and others. You know what I'm saying? But primarily by the Democratic Party. And this is not. I'm not one of those black people. I'm not a Republican. I'm a fierce independent. Neither party is a friend to our community. They kind of swap. They take turns being the friend of the Negro. I've always believed that was that's intentional. That they talk about it. That they plan it. That you know what I'm saying. So I'm not. This is not a thing to say. See the Democrats. No, this is just the truth. Right, this is what the Democratic Party was at the turn of the 20th century, right? And they were propagating, the fear of Negro rule, because there were areas where black people were in the majority. You're not the minority everywhere, right? Particularly in areas in the South. And so they were propagating the fear of Negro rule, putting that in the minds of working class white people to prevent white people, working class white folks and black folks, for forming voting blocks like they did in Wilmington. One of the things about Wilmington, they practice fusion politics. Working class white people, working class black people, working class people, period, were voting together, and they were in control. The Southern elite did not like that. The Southern Democratic elite in particular, and they chose a target. They chose to target working class and middle class, upper middle class black people. And they used propaganda like this to do it. Imagine this being in the newspaper. This was the fear of Negro rule.
As an observer, that are very overt in what they're trying to get across.
There's still a
You
fear
have to remember, not everybody is
of
literate
Negro rule.
as they are now. And so somebody looking at a newspaper may not be able to read the whole paper, but if they saw that cartoon, then they would understand what the paper was about and subscribe to that point of view. For the other component in the speech making that was going on, we had people like Alfred Moore Wydell and Charles Brantley Aycock going around the state giving pro-white supremacy speeches and making Wilmington the focal point of the state campaign. Because if the Democratic Party couldn't take over control of Wilmington, then the rest of the state might not follow. So it was multiple levels of propaganda that were going on.
Propaganda is essential to any military campaign. Black people tend not to understand propaganda. And the reason why we tend not to understand propaganda is because the propaganda channels, the mediums, the conduits, the radio, the television, the newspaper, we tend to just treat as forms of entertainment. We don't see them as military strategy. When there's a movie depicting black people in a negative image, when there's caricature.
I really don't like blanket statements. Like he's giving some accurate history here, and he's definitely right on that. There are those who fall for the propaganda. Excuse me. That there are those who fall for propaganda. There are those who don't understand propaganda, but it's not exclusively black. Right, working class white people and white people in general, right? They are the biggest fools when it comes to propaganda. They're the worst recognizers of when they're being manipulated and propagated to. You know what I'm saying? So I love that he's pointing out, you know what I'm saying, that yes, propaganda was used, and yes, many black people are still manipulated by propaganda in the media. But we have to get away from making blanket statements like, so black people really don't understand propaganda, because I'm black and I understand propaganda, right? And it's kind of like you're feeding into white supremacy, or you feeding into black inferiority, you know what I'm saying, in order to make your point, right? All of us are not ignorant of what's going on, you know what I'm saying? Like quite a few black people then and now understood what was going on. But understanding what's going on and having the power to be vocal about it or having the power to do anything about it are two different things, right? And so we have to make sure we don't do a disservice to the fact that there's always been black people who knew the game. There's always been black people who are educating other black people on the games that these folks are playing. The black people in Wilmington, North Carolina back then, everybody wasn't oblivious to what was going on. They were very aware. Many were very aware of what's going on. During this time, and when Hollywood was depicting black people as minstrels and things like that, you had whole black movements that were going against that propaganda. People like Oscar Micheaux and others, even W.B. Du Bois, backed the film company to kind of counter the propaganda. So yes, he's telling the truth here, but at the same time, let's avoid blanket statements like, yeah, see, black folks tend to not really understand. See, what black people don't know, what black people don't know. I mean, that's kind of like a racist statement within itself, because you're propagating black inferiority while pointing out the thing. Is almost like we want to be like, I'm a special black. I'm not one of those blacks that are fools. See, black people don't usually know this. See, black people don't understand this. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the case. You know what I'm saying? There are plenty black people who understand and have always understood what was going on.
In the newspaper, making jokes about black people, we tend to just see it as political entertainment. We don't see it as laying the foundation before the storm.
Many
That's
do
exactly
see it.
what they did in Wilmington. You always seek to create a context that allows your military campaign to be acceptable. There's always context. You study Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. He had a propaganda campaign that lasted over a year before he began to physically oppress the Jews. He had to make sure that the national mindset had been conditioned to accept the extermination to come. In Wilmington, North Carolina, the same exact thing happened years before Nazi Germany. Through the magazines, through the radio, through word of mouth, through stage play, they created negative images of black people in the minds of white folk in case there were any liberals who would have been against what they were going to do. They were slowly able to reform their opinion by constantly repeating negative information about the target population. See, the one thing about the brain that we got to understand is the creature of repetition. Whoever has the most access to the brain rules the brain. It's all about volume, not quality. The more you tell people that a certain group of people are no good, the more you show images, the more you show sounds, song, poem, dance, projecting negative information about a people, sooner or later, the subconscious begins to get conditioned automatically, because you can't turn off the subconscious to what it sees and what it hears. Sound and image, you cannot stop it except to stay away from it. So sound and image are critical to any propaganda campaign because they help lessen the defenses of anyone who may be against what you're trying to do. It's the same thing happening right now. There is a direct assault on the image of the black man and woman internationally. So when mass incarceration, homicide takes place, nobody cares what's happening to black folk because they've already been conditioned to believe that these people are better off dead anyway. So propaganda is the first stage of military warfare. Right now, we're being set up for another extermination campaign. It's going to be worse than what went on in Wilmington, Tulsa, Charleston, Rosewood. It's going to be worse. Whenever the propaganda gets worse, then you know the extermination is going to be that much worse, because you see how far the exterminator had to go in order to condition the people to prepare them for the carnage to come.
I mean, look at how the government, and I'm not going to say Trump. I'm going to say the government. They're all working together. Look at how the government demonizes illegal immigrants, or demonizes people who come from other countries. Well, certain people. They don't demonize European immigrants, right? So look at how they demonize non-European immigrants. You know, they laid the propaganda down first, right? Then you start the campaign. Then you start putting people in camps, that sort of thing. But by the time that happens, the populace has been desensitized. Even those who are against it, we're desensitized enough to not fight against it. Right? It's like, oh, I hate that you're doing that over there. I'm just going to turn away. Right? See, the goal is you don't have to agree, But if I normalize something crazy to you, at the very least, you'll just turn away. Or at the most, you'll turn away. Like, okay, yeah, that slavery was horrible. I just didn't participate. But you didn't fight to stop it. Right? And so the America's been desensitized to the incarceration and silencing of black men. It's desensitized to the perpetual poverty of the masses of black people, right? And so that's still going on, and Umar was right about that. And you have to understand that the negative propaganda, right? That negative propaganda is a tool to keep the powerless, right? You can't get past it. You have a hard time getting past the image that the mainstream media has thrown against you. Like one thing I notice right now, there are no real strong black men in mainstream politics. You don't see us, right? And so, yeah, y'all know what I'm talking about. I'll look at it a little bit more.
By the elections of 1896, the Democrats were basically out of power. The fusionist coalition of the black Republicans and white populists held a majority of offices throughout the state, including at the legislature. We had a Republican governor. In New Hanover County, there were, of the 5 county commissioners, there were 2 Republicans and a populist and 2 Democrats. So the Democrats basically were out of power, and they had to figure out a way to regain power. And so that was what led to the creation of the White Government Union in 1897, was to win the elections of 1898, even if they had to cheat or use intimidation or threats, murder, armed rebellion, whatever it took. They were going to regain power in 1898, one way or another.
The election for 1898 wasn't for the management of the city of Wilmington or the county. So they wanted to have some resolution, since the Democratic Party had swept the ballot, so that the Democrats would also control the city and the county. They developed a series of resolutions called the White Declaration of Independence. And in the White Declaration of Independence, some of the demands placed on the African American community were that Alex Manly needed to leave the city. He needed to stop printing his paper, and many people wanted the Board of Aldermen and the mayor to resign. And Alfred Mar Waddell, our great speech maker, was made chairman of a committee of 25 men to make these resolutions happen from the White Declaration of Independence. They called together the Committee of Colored Citizens that they decided were leaders in the black community. They were civic leaders, business leaders, church leaders, and they were given these demands by Waddell in this committee of 25. And these Committee of Colored Citizens members eventually answered by saying, we don't really have the authority to make these things happen, but we will do all that we can in the interest of peace to encourage things to happen. And so that response of the Committee of Colored Citizens was to be delivered to Waddell by the next morning on the 10th. So the morning of the 10th comes, and Waddell is informed of the response of the Committee of Colored Citizens, but he chose not to share that information with the rest of the whites in the community. So Waddell went to the Wilmington Light Infantry Armory on the morning of the 10th to meet with other members of the white community to talk about the Committee of Colored Citizens and their response, or the lack thereof. And he met a crowd of people, and the crowd got larger and larger and larger. Folks had guns. Folks wanted some action. Wilmington had been very tense, and it was as if a breaking point. Something had to happen to release the tension. And so Waddell arranged the men that were in the area together in almost like skirmish lines, because he was, after all, a Confederate officer. He marched them up Market, up to 7th, and they went down to the printing press building, knocked on the door. Manly had been warned ahead of time that he needed to get out of the city, which he did. No one answered. Oops, they broke in the door. Oh, wow, look at all this stuff. They walk around the building. Oops, they found some gas and some kerosene, and oops, somebody happened to light a match and the building caught. and they wouldn't allow the African American fire company to come in to put the fire out until the building was mostly consumed, but before it happened to catch other nearby houses on fire. So once the fire was put out, the building was destroyed, the printing press was destroyed, and the voice of the African American community through the black press was destroyed.
This is South 7th Street, 7th and Church. And as far as I could tell by doing research, this was where the Daily Record was located, Alexander Manley's newspaper. And it was right next to a very historic church, St. Luke. My understanding is that the mob came down 7th Street from Market Street, where the Wilmington Light Infantry is, which later became the Wilmington Library. And they came down, the mob came down this street, and the first thing they did was some people said it was accidental. They didn't mean to burn it down, but they actually burned this Daily Record building down. They watched it burn. There's several pictures of it. I mean, there was a photo taken of them actually standing around the burned building. So this is where it happened. Manley's Daily Record was burned right here.
Manley owned basically the Republican newspaper in the city of Wilmington, and William H. Bernard, who was a former Confederate officer, owned the Democratic newspaper, the Star News, which is still in circulation today. William H. Bernard was also a member of the Wilmington Light Infantry, an officer, in fact. But I find it ironic that one of the first actions of the coup leaders was to burn out a colonel of the Wilmington Light Infantry's main opposition newspaper. I mean, they burned his building to the ground and ran him out of town. I don't think they had planned on running him out of town. Personally, I think he was on the hit list.
Right.
They had planned on killing Manley, but he got away. So they burned the competition out. And then after that, it was just the Star News, and that's all that's basically still here today. There's some small publications, but nothing like the Star News.
So you saying that, Alex Manley's newspaper, Wilmington Daily Record, really was the main newspaper?
Yeah, it was the largest circulation newspaper in the county, and they got burned out to financially, benefit a colonel of the Wilmington Light Infantry. I mean, this really all boils down to power and money is really what it all boils down to.
Still does. This is the 1890s, right? And this is what I like to call the second Civil War, right? The North won the battle, man. The South won the war, okay? They say the Civil War was won by the North, and that's the war wasn't really over after the Emancipation Proclamation. It wasn't really over. It wasn't even over after 1865, because politically there was a lot of maneuvering that still needed to be done. The reign of terror of the Democratic Party, the Ku Klux Klan in the South, you know what I'm saying? All of that was allowed to go on. So that's the second Civil War. The whites taking the South back, right? That was war. That wasn't done through a democratic process. Wilmington didn't go from being a majority black town with black people in power to being a town dominated by the white power structure peacefully. People didn't get up and vote. Right? You're right, Dustin. Right? People didn't get up and vote for this. Right? So here's a clear example, of strategy. Right? And you see so many layers of it. You see this powerful white newspaper, or this white newspaper run by a Confederate colonel or Confederate lieutenant, right, propagating for years about the fear of Negro rule, that white women are being raped, that sort of thing, right? Just to build up that fervor. Then they set up a shadow government. They set up a white government's council, right, for white people, where they lay out their demands. These white people, they actually call in the black leaders and get a list of demands. We want Manley, who runs the black newspaper, which at that time was the largest circulating newspaper in that town. We want him out of town. We want him gone. Because when they were trying to propagate that white women were being raped, he came back in his newspaper and stated, no, ain't no white women getting raped, but there is some fooling around going on down here, but it ain't no rape. I guarantee you that. They coming for it, right? And so that put him on a hit list, okay? And then what a coincidence that when the white mob finally gets together and say we're gonna destroy and run the blacks out of town, or we're gonna burn something down, they go straight to that newspaper first, and they burn down the black voice. They burn down the media. Remember, no internet at this time, right? Ain't no social media, right? The newspaper, that is your medium. If you ran a printing press, if you could print and circulate news, right? You had power, okay? In this newspaper, the Star News, which was run by this white Confederate, he's the leader of the mob. And where does he go first? He goes to burn down the competition, right? And the Star News is still the number one newspaper in that area today, or one of the top newspapers in that area today. So they got to enjoy another 100 some odd years of prosperity, but they didn't do it fair and square. They didn't just have better marketing. They didn't have better stories, and they didn't do it. They didn't work hard to build the paper. They used terrorism to do it, and they've never had to pay for it. Nobody ever went to burn down the Star News. And no one went to jail for this. There's been no reparations for it. So when folks are looking around talking about, yes, the spirit of America, we built this country and we've done this. No, you cheated. You cheated. And you didn't just cheat in Wilmington. This is cheating. This ain't democracy. So don't listen to these hypocrites. And when they try to wax poetic about the history here and not wanting to face, the struggles that people have gone through. And we need to understand this, because some of us are still coming out of college and coming out of high school naive, thinking that freedom is just waiting for us, that everything is being laid out there for us, that there's no such thing as systemic racism, as if there's no such thing as people cheating to stay in power. These people cheat. They cheat. And you have to understand that in order to avoid it, go through it, get around it, get under it. When you you know what I'm saying? You got to understand it. Like y'all looking at Trump, y'all think Trump is trying to lose the midterms or the Republican Party? They willing to cheat. January the 6th, and white folks was climbing up them walls because they could be propagated against. Because you could feed this population anything when it comes to information. We are highly susceptible to suggestion in the United States. We are not educated as critical thinkers. That's not how we're educated. We're educated to respond to emotion, to emotional stimuli. That's what we're educated to do. Look at a little bit more.
But they use the pretext of white supremacy to gain the power and thus the money.
It's about money and power. They got us caught up in the crayon box, thinking it's all about that. Rich white
The
folks.
secession laws of
This.
1895, the North Carolina legislature had passed a statute that enabled citizens to petition a superior court to appoint people to elected boards if there was a certain number of signatures on that petition. On November 10th, 1898, the makeup of the New Hanover County Commissioners was 2 Republicans, a populist, and 2 Democrats. And so the Republicans and populists had a majority over the 2 Democrats, and so therefore they couldn't call out the militia. So William Barry McCoy drew up a petition pursuant to the laws of 1895 and asking a Superior Court judge named Boykin to appoint 2 Democrats to the New Hanover County Commission. This now changed the makeup of the county commissioners from 2 Republicans and a populist and 2 Democrats to 2 Republicans, a populist, and 4 Democrats.
You right, Dustin?
The Democrats now had a majority on the county commissioners, and they could now call out the Wilmington Light Infantry. And this is what occurred. This petition was drawn up in William Barry McCoy's office at 109 Princess Street. And if you follow the names and the addresses of where these people worked at in the order of the way this petition was signed, they went right around the corner from William Barry McCoy's office at 109 Princess Street and went to North Water Street and started collecting signatures. And I have researched these people, and I've researched their office addresses, and you can follow the mob as they were going around from North Water Street, down South Water Street, down Market Street, back to the courthouse, where they ended up with almost 300 people who had signed the petition. And then they went in front of the judge with the petition. The judge approved it. There's the approval right there. He appointed in the courtroom 2 Democrats to the county commissioners. The mob then marched around the corner to the Wilmington Light Infantry building, held a rally, and then passed out the guns and marched on Brooklyn and took over the government of New Hanover County in the city of Wilmington. That's when the shooting started.
I'm gonna stop it right there. Again, this documentary is called Wilmington on Fire. You can watch it on a black-owned streaming platform called Kweli.tv, Kweli TV. I just wanted to watch a little bit of it this morning. I'm fasting this month and just getting up every morning and having me a nice pre-dawn, sort of a pre-dawn meal, maybe some soup, something like that, because I have to teach, so I have to get some kind of energy going on before dawn, and doing some study. And I was watching this documentary this morning, and I just thought, man, let me stream some of it, just kind of help wake people up this morning and encourage everyone to study, to study our story, to be, to exercise critical thinking. The best way to understand what's going on right now is to learn how we got here, right? There is no present without the past. There's no future without the present. And you just saw an example of the citizens taking over a county with a petition. They circulated a petition in Wilmington, North Carolina, got 300 signatures, right, to add an extra person to a board that had the power to call out the county militia. Once they got that petition signed and the judge added another Democrat to the county militia, they immediately walked over to the weapons, the ammunitions dump, and got and weaponed up and took over the county by force, right here in the United States of America. A coup, a political coup. People will tell you that nothing like that's ever happened here before. That's not a lie. I mean that's a lie. That's not true, right? So check out Wilmington on Fire. It's going to trip you out. Think about today and what's going on today while you do it. Powerful, powerful. It's not. They try to wax poetic about how we got here, and about this country and how it was built. And nah, man, you got to read between the lines. You have to go and study the details and understand, especially black people. This has not been easy. Freedom is not free. Our journey in this country, our experience in this country is unique. It's a unique experience, a very unique experience. It's been hard. It's been horrible at times, but at the same time, we've also found success in this country. We've persevered. every time I watch something like this, I don't get depressed. I'm like, man, what a strong people. What a resilient people to come out of over 300 years of chattel slavery, right? And right out of slavery, not 30 years later, you're in leadership in one of the most successful towns in North Carolina, right? And that's no small feat. You're talking about people who are lawyers, people who are running newspapers, whose parents were probably enslaved. So you're talking about this next generation, coming out of slavery, that's really taking the bull by the horns and making the most out of freedom, seeking freedom, building freedom, seeking to protect freedom, understanding that land and education is a must. Man, I admire that generation. But then you're talking about a nation who allowed lawlessness, right, to take hold and allow terrorists to come in and take from those people who worked so hard, people who worked up from slavery to get what they had. To have people, to allow people to come and take it from them. These people hadn't broken any laws. These people hadn't violated anybody's rights. To allow that to be taken is one of the biggest betrayals. It has to be one of the biggest betrayals of a government, or by a government, to its citizens in history. We don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about the impact enough. So when you see what's going on today and you look at it look like the government really ain't for the people. Of course it's not for the people. That's not a new development. And now that whites are feeling it, now that more and more working class whites are feeling it, you see more and more working class whites and more white people speaking out. Welcome to our world. Welcome to the world where you can't trust the government. Welcome to the world where you kind of don't go to the hospital and all that because you remember Tuskegee experiments and you see high infant mortality rates within the hospital system. So you don't trust. You can't really trust what's being put in front of you. Welcome to our world. All right. Anyway, just wanted to show that I got to go because again, we don't wallow. We don't wallow in the issues. We just don't avoid them. We don't wallow in negativity, but we don't avoid it. We don't sit here and just talk about what's wrong, but we don't avoid what's wrong. You have to acknowledge what's wrong in order to get to what's right. And what's right about us is our creativity. What's right about us is that we're still here. What's right about us is that we're still getting to that information. You have plenty of people out here that are working, that are teaching, that are organizing. That's what's right about us. What's right about us is that we've survived all of it up until now. There's no reason to believe that we won't survive this phase of American history as well. But there's only one way that we do it. That's together. All right? That's the only way we do it. That's together. All right. So y'all, let's get organized. Let's build institutions. Let's support institutions that support the people, that support the community. I got to go, but I'll be back. I'm finding my voice today. All right, y'all. Hey, support the Uhuru Academy. All right. So let me end that by I can't let y'all just get off the hook. I can't let y'all off the hook, man. You got to support the Uhuru Academy. You need to go to uhuruacademy.com. All right. Or you can cash app us. All right. $ Uhuru Academy. I'm not on top of my verbal game this morning. That's okay though. We ain't doing no tripping. I want to thank everybody that tuned in and everybody that's gonna tune in later. But support the Uhuru Academy. You can go to uhuruacademy.com. You can cash app us at $ Uhuru Academy. Have some big trainings coming up. Got a lot coming up, right? Shout out to the South Carolina Juneteenth Freedom Fest coming June 20th. Anyway, I'll be black, y'all. I'll be black, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Hey, y'all have a good one. Peace.